It's time for another episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas, the podcast covering the intersection of business, culture, entrepreneurship, and life in general here in the Ozarks. Whether you are considering a move to this area or trying to learn more about the place you call home, we've got something special for you. Here's our host, Randy Wilburn.
Hey folks, and welcome to another episode of the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast. I'm your host, Randy Wilburn. I'm excited to be with you today as always. Today I have a great guest with me, and you guys know that I love to bring individuals on that I don't know at all. Maybe somebody else knows them. Maybe I've been referred to them by other people that said, oh, you should have this person on or that person on the podcast. But today's guest is Noah Washington, and he has a really popular YouTube show called the Ridin Around Show. And Noah basically does a little James Corden a la carpool karaoke and brings together some amazing people here in Northwest Arkansas that sit down with him and kind of walk them through what they're up to. And also they get a little singing in during the process. So I think it's kind of cool. And I want to give a special shout out to Karen Wagaman from the Rogers Lowell Chamber of Commerce for actually introducing us. He was already on my radar screen. I just hadn't gotten around to reaching out to him, but I really liked what he was doing. And when Karen introduced us via email, I said, you know what, let me have this young man on the podcast because, you know, he's doing something that had I been his age in school, I probably would have tried to create some type of show like this. But that was a long time ago, way before the interwebs and all that good stuff. And I don't want to date myself, but I just want to welcome Noah Washington to the podcast. How are you doing, man?
Pretty good. Thank you for having me on.
Good. Listen, man, I'm excited to have you here, and I would love for you just to give, because you're a young guy. I mean, you're a rising sophomore at the University of Arkansas in the broadcast journalism program, and you started a show this year, right? Called the Ridin Around Show.
Yes, sir.
It's not like you don't already have a lot of stuff to already do. I mean, you've got schoolwork, you got to keep up with your grades, and you've decided, I need to start a YouTube show to get things going. But I would love for you just to tell the audience a little bit about yourself and who Noah Washington is.
Yeah, so I'm Northwest Arkansas native, grew up here my whole life. My dad played football for the Razorbacks, so I grew up a Razorback sports fan.
That's cool.
Loved cars since I was a kid, so you can start putting together a few of my passions, cars, music, and sports, and you get the Ridin Around Show. But yeah, I'm a 19-year-old sophomore at the University of Arkansas, like you said. Pretty much the gist of it.
That's it, yeah. So tell me, when you started this and stepped out and decided that I'm going to go ahead and do this, what was it like? I mean, what did your parents say? Were they excited for you?
I love that question. I've never been asked that. I don't even think I told my parents really before I did it. I kind of was just like, let me order the cameras. I have the vision. Let me learn how to set this up and let me just get a guest on.
I love that. No, see, that's what I'm always saying about your generation, right? You're part of Gen Z. Yeah. And I mean, you can take direction, but you also are willing to ideate and try new things, right? Yeah. And I think that is and certainly you're no stranger to cameras because you're the generation that grew up with, TikTok and Snapchat and Vine and all these others. It's almost a natural extension for you to be able to kind of do something that is like what you're doing with the Ridin Around Show. Yeah. So tell me this, what is the thing that has really, what was the original idea behind the show? And did you get any inspiration whatsoever from James Corden, the late night show?
Yeah. So the original concept, I would say I got to give credit to Car Test by Tidal.
Okay.
It's a Elliott Wilson title owned by Jay-Z. They did a car episode with Nipsey Hussle.
Okay.
And so in the back of the car, they talked with Nipsey Hussle about, where he was at in his career and played some of his music. And I saw that, and Nipsey Hussle's one of my all-time greats. So I saw that, I was like,
he died too young.
Yeah, that's true.
He died really too young. So yeah, such a talented individual. But man, I didn't mean to cut you off. Good. But yeah, as I was thinking about this, because actually a good friend of mine that I went to college with was a mentor to Nipsey Hussle. And it broke him up when he died. He lived out in LA and really spoke into his life. And he said that Nipsey Hussle had such a vision, not just for himself, but for his community. which was huge. So
I try to embody that as much as I can.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm pretty sure he'd be smiling down on you right now because you're kind of taking, the onus on yourself, right? To kind of get out there and do something and essentially create something from nothing, which I can truly understand because that's what I did with this podcast. I didn't have a framework for it. I was like, I think I want to do this. And I was already podcasting. So it was just kind of a natural thing. Had you had any previous experience, even though you had the inspiration with the show that you mentioned, had you had any previous experience with cameras, with, telling your story from a visual standpoint?
No, all happened within a 3-month period where I started vlogging and then transitioned into doing the show. So I moved to campus. I took a gap year. I got an apartment on campus. Wasn't a student though. And I started vlogging games I would go to and went down one time and interviewed KJ Jefferson after a football game. And I realized podcasts were, kind of a big thing during COVID at that point. And I was like, okay, I have access to these athletes through my dad. I already am vlogging sports events. Maybe let me use my access to start this kind of goes back to your question about what was the vision. It was originally to be a podcast, no visuals. I was like, let me just get athletes on. And then I realized I could, use my love for cars that was also shared with a lot of athletes to rent some cars to do some cool shoots with the athletes. But I was thinking photos at that point.
Right.
And I realized after I saw the car testing with Nipsey, I was like, I can put these podcast interview guests in a car.
Yeah.
And then it became a show rather than a podcast.
Oh, man. So I love that because I think that shows your creativity, right? With it, it's almost like a mashup of different ideas.
It's remix for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Or remix. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It is a remix. And you've kind of taken, and even what I like about your show, and I really want to encourage everybody and we'll put in the show notes a link to Noah's YouTube channel. You can easily reach, and I want to encourage you to subscribe. I want to be the reason why he has 1,000 new subscribers right here in Northwest Arkansas, that everybody that listens to the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast decides to support this young man and what he's doing with the Ridin Around show. But you took, what was essentially the idea of an interview and totally elevated it to a whole nother level where you've got some funny and witty banter, some serious questions, right?
Yeah.
You are able to inject some humor into the conversation. And of course, there's the carpool karaoke itself, right? Which is kind of like, that's like the coup de grace of all of it, right? And
for copyright reasons, we have to say car karaoke.
Car karaoke.
Carpool karaoke.
Yeah, so is that how you're able to play the music that you play?
No, most of our episodes aren't monetized.
Okay.
So
on
YouTube, if you play another artist's music, it copyrights the episode, which means you can't monetize it.
Okay.
So all of our income comes from advertisers. We don't get any AdSense or anything from YouTube.
Got you. Right. Yeah. Because typically for those of you, and if you're like me and you spend a lot of time on YouTube, you have to endure a lot of ads. But on Noah's show, you don't have to endure those ads. What I did like about it was how you were able to selectively highlight those organizations and businesses that you partner with. And I think that's important to understand that none of this stuff that we do, what I do, what Noah does, it's free. It all costs money. I mean, I'm in the Furman Garner Performance Studio here at the lovely KUAF Studios, but all of this costs money. I mean, it costs money to keep the lights on. And so anytime you are consuming this digital content, whether it's audio through podcasts like what I do, or whether you're watching Noah's video on YouTube, that all costs money. And in order for him to be able to continue to do this, he needs support. And that's where he gets some of that support from some of the car companies that he works with, which I thought was an ingenious idea, because it's like, why wouldn't a local car company want to, loan a car or two out to you? Now, you're a young guy.
Yeah, I was going to say, besides the fact that
you're a young guy, and certainly you hit that. I remember, and this is just an aside, but I remember when I turned 25, it was a big deal. Why? Well, because car rental companies treat you differently when you're 25. And you'll learn that in a few years. You got a ways to go, but don't rush your youth, because my one piece of advice, and I have a son that's 1 year younger than you, Joshua, and I keep telling him, just take your time, because it will all roll out for you. Before you know it, you'll look back and be like, dang, I'm 30. Where did all the time go? By then, you'll probably have something on the networks, or you will have created your own network, right? So, but no, seriously though, one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you on to this podcast too was because I think people don't realize that it's not as hard as you think. I mean, it's hard to put the work in, but it's not as hard
to stay consistent.
It's hard to stay consistent. But I would love for you just to kind of talk to people about what has become your inspiration for doing this show on a regular basis. I know a lot of work goes into it. I don't know if you do your own editing or if you do all of that, like, because I mean, some people are one-stop shop. I used to edit my audio, but I don't anymore because I have an editor. But I mean, so how about for you?
So I'll answer inspiration and then production behind the scenes first. So inspiration, definitely just the impact I can have on the community and the people I can meet. It's like, I mean, I was never someone who originally was like, oh, I want to be famous. But having fans is the weirdest experience. Getting asked for photos in public it used to be awkward for me, but now it's just kind of, just like validation of my work. And I love stopping and talking to those people about what their favorite episode was and stuff like that. And then going to basketball games and kind of just talking to the fans who love, like, oh, I never seen the athletes in this light. And so definitely the impact I can have on whatever community I'm covering.
Sure.
And then the production standpoint, I mean, we film with 5 cameras. That all has to be synced up and edited for every episode. Takes about 20 hours of editing per episode.
Wow.
For the first 9 to 10 months, almost a year, I did it all myself.
Really?
So I would go, network for the advertiser, network and secure the guests, prep the night before for the interview, set up the equipment, film with the guests, go home, put it all on a hard drive, edit it for the next week, put it out, clip it, market it. Like, it's the whole thing.
It's a lot of work. Plus, even just setting up those cameras properly, a lot of times, I know you probably use those suctions to keep those cameras suctioned up to the glass. Shout out GoPro. Yeah, exactly. GoPro goes a long way in making it happen. But I have to say that your video quality is excellent. I mean, you do a really good job of that. And again, I want to encourage everybody to visit YouTube and just look up the Ridin Around Show. I also looked up Noah Washington, Arkansas, and his show will come up. That's the first thing that comes up. So there's several ways to find Noah and his show. And we'll put, again, a link to the YouTube channel in our show notes. But I certainly want you to support this young man any way that you can. So how many episodes have you done as of today?
We're probably approaching 30 or past 30.
That's a lot. Yeah. That's a lot of episodes. So you've had some great guests on. You had Danielle Musselman on, Mandy Hunt on, you had Miss Arkansas on, you had Anthony Black on. I mean, you've had basically all of the main players in on the community, the University of Arkansas basketball team. You've had some football players on. You had the brand new chancellor on. I saw that, Charles Robinson, which I thought was kind of cool. Out of all of those guests, what has been like the one takeaway that stands out to you in terms of, or what's the one theme that you've realized in doing these podcast interviews with such a wide variety of people from different walks of life, right? I mean, you've got multi-millionaires on the show. Billionaires, soon to be multi-millionaires, right? Anthony Black is going at the time that we're recording this. There will be an NBA draft, and he has elected to go to the draft, which I'm sorry to see him go, but I'm happy for him in terms of his career and
he's put in the work.
Means. Yeah, he's put in the work. He's 6'7". He's going to have to put on a little bit more weight, but I think when I look at him, I think about him and I look at what Jimmy Butler's doing in the NBA, and I'm like, man, Anthony Black could do that. He could definitely be a legitimate threat. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But what is it like? I mean, what's the one common through line theme that you have with all of these different people from different walks of life?
I'd say on a personal note, like looking at like what I've learned is that we're all human and we're all the same. I think, I myself struggled with that, and I grew up with an NFL father who had me around millionaires and celebrities. So I assume that's probably something a lot of people kind of might not have broken down that barrier in their mind, but we're all human, no matter if it's about to be an NBA player or a millionaire. They all, some people worry about public opinion. Other people are just fearless, but they're all, I don't know. It was weird. That's probably the biggest takeaway. That's why I said I love meeting people, is because every time I meet somebody new, I'm just like, okay,
this person's just like me.
Yeah.
And everything's good, right? Even when you meet like billionaires. So I loved how on the episode with Mandy Hunt, you guys were comparing notes about your sneaker game.
Right.
And I think at the time you had recorded that, they had just had the sneaker ball, or there was some kind
Suits and
Sneakers, right? Yeah. So they had just had, which is a really big event here. It's a big fundraising event. And Mandy talked about the name, image, and likeness and how they had signed the whole basketball team, which I didn't actually really know that. So you reported some news to me. I must have missed that memo, but when I saw that, I was like, man, that's really interesting. And the key thing about what they're doing with the NIL is that they are getting these young, soon to be, a lot of them professional players, they are getting them prepared to give back to the community through nonprofits, which is a lot different than it's like, this is
promote a product
Daily
or something.
Chevrolet or whatever. Nothing against the Chevrolet dealership or anybody else for that matter. But they're giving them a framework to work from where these young men and women will understand that it's important to give back, even in small form, because it will ultimately pay off in the long run.
For sure. I will say, I do think I almost said NFL, NIL around here is, the business owners want them to push a product, but at the end of the day, a lot of the business owners I talk to, they just want to support the athlete. So they're like, we don't really care about the return. We just want them to take a picture with our brand.
Yeah.
But regarding AAC, Athlete Advocate Consortium, I think Mandy Hunt's outreach community thing, she signs all the players and has them partner with different local nonprofits and gives back to the community. So it's great.
I think that's genius. Yeah, I'm going to have to, maybe I'll have to have you introduce me to her, because I would love to have her on the podcast to talk with maybe her and Brian, or just her, to talk about, what that means and the impact that it's actually having on the players, right? Because again, it's a big world out there. A lot of these young people that are super successful at a high level of sport at the University of Arkansas will or may potentially go on and make tons of money. But it's ultimately, at the end of the day, when all is said and done, it's what you do with that money that matters the most.
Yeah. I haven't heard this from the Hunt, so I don't want to speak on their behalf. But from my perspective, I think they understand that this is a pit stop for most athletes.
Yeah.
And so they want to make sure that the athletes use their time here to help the community.
Absolutely.
The most, so
cool. I mean, but again, it's a genius move because it is setting a standard for them at a young age of what it means to give back. And then in giving back, they're able to,
helps everyone.
It helps everybody. It really does. Cool. So I'll put a link to the AAC program on the show notes as well. So anybody listening to this that wants to learn more about what the Hunts are doing and that genius move that they did to sign the whole basketball team, and I'm sure they're doing others like that. I think that's pretty cool. So has it been your goal to try to connect with as many sports folks as you could at the U of A? Like, are you going to take a gymnast out for a ride? Or is there a softball player in the works? I mean, maybe I missed it, but I didn't see one yet. So I'm just curious to know. Because, I was watching some of the softball game yesterday. The women were playing Tennessee. It was a very important game. And I mean, those young ladies are extremely talented. And I know there's some soccer players. Maybe you had a soccer player, a woman's soccer player. I have not.
I have to say this in case there's any athletes listening. Every single Razorback sport I support, and they are all phenomenal. I have not been able to get to all the sports that I want to.
It's hard. Well, you're just one person, though, too. Right. That's the other thing. So is there a team around you, or is it pretty much just you?
So I have an editor in training right now. Okay. And so I would project in the next month, I'll kind of take over a lot of that.
Look at you, an editor in training. You're just going to once you show him him or her the blueprint, then it's like, that's it, right? It should be pretty easy for them to replicate what you've done previously, because you set the standard.
Also, AI is coming out. So Autopod is a new platform that will edit your podcast for you. So.
It's crazy. Yeah. I mean, listen, I play around with AI quite a bit. I have found a big use. I'm using ChatGPT-4. I use a couple of other programs like CapShow and Cast Magic that allow me to create show notes and things of that nature. I can actually show you some of that stuff when we're done with this. But I'm telling you, man, that the technology is there where, once you actually record whatever you're recording, you can spit it back into a computer, and the computer will put it out in so many different variations for you.
I love it, but I hate it. It's scary to me. I'm young, so my peers might not share this philosophy, but I'm kind of a older soul, so I'm looking at the big picture. I'm like, man, this might not be good in the long run. But
I mean, I was just having a conversation about this at lunch today about just the fears of AI, and I think some are truly founded, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, there could potentially be some challenges, but as human beings, I think one of the guys that was one of the main creators of artificial intelligence was talking about, he's been studying, he just recently left Google so that he could kind of go off and do his own thing. He said that my one concern, I have a concern for what AI will ultimately evolve into, but I also am encouraged by the fact that, the human brain is quite malleable and smart. Yeah. And so I think there's a lot of opportunities there for us to take advantage of it that way. So, we'll see what happens. But I think you're absolutely right. AI will change the game and how you do production and what have you. but you still have to ask the questions. You still have to have that personality.
Oh, it's not coming for my job yet.
Right.
But.
Yeah, it's not coming for that yet. No, it isn't. But I think you'll be fine. And again, ideating just this whole concept around what you're doing with the Ridin Around Show, I think is just simple genius. But so what has been your biggest revelation with regard to the guests that you've had on? Has anybody been shared anything that was really powerful for you in terms of their experiences and what they've gone through? Yeah,
I feel like I research and prep for my interviews enough.
I noticed that. You asked some good questions. I mean, I remember you asked Mandy about her because her shoe game is pretty tight and she has a big collection, not like Imelda Marcos, but she has a big collection of shoes. But I noticed with Anthony Black, you had a lot of really good questions for him about the whole process that he goes through in terms of preparing to.
I forgot to ask him what his hair care routine is. Hopefully that'll be the follow-up.
Yeah, what you wonder, right? Those are the kind of things that you wonder. So
I know off camera now.
Right.
That's the thing. Right. I end up developing friendships with most of the guests, especially my ones my peers. So
and that's funny you mentioned that. And I've done 200 at the time of we're recording this in May of 2023. I've done 218 episodes. Wow. So, and I've become friends with a lot of the guests, like legitimate friends. Like, I don't just text you to tell you when to meet me at the studio so that we can record this. And then that's the last you hear of me until it comes out. And then you don't hear from me ever again. I legitimately have most of the people that I've had on this podcast. I have them in my phone. I text them quite a bit to check in on them and see how they're doing. And, and I think a lot of it, certainly during the pandemic, when everything hit the fan, I was constantly checking in on a lot of the chefs that I had on the podcast and others that were really impacted by the fact that everybody was staying at home and wasn't going out and spending money the way that we normally were pre-pandemic. So, yeah, I mean, it taught me a lot about the value of building relationships and what they mean for the long run. And I can kind of tell that you build a rapport with your guests really quickly and it shows, right? So, I mean, that's a good thing. And then it's so clearly you're building enough of a rapport that people are like, hey, I actually like this Noah guy. Let's hang out sometime or let's do some stuff. So, but I think that's cool. I mean, that's a huge takeaway. I think any young person listening to this that's your age needs to understand and respect the value of relationships. And I imagine that your dad was probably a good and is a good example for you. For sure. So then that way you use that, you've leveraged that in your own relationships.
For sure. He hasn't been hands-on a lot of my decisions, but anytime I need to check with him, or he's kind of just been that backbone of moral support of anytime if you run a podcast, consistency's hard. So he'll be the person telling me you're already this far and you better keep going.
You got to keep going. Yeah. No. Well, he's absolutely right, man. I mean, you cannot stop. You can always pivot, but you can't stop, right? And so that's what I've tried to do. I mean, I remember when I first started this podcast, I actually had another podcast that I was doing, and I still manage several podcasts for some clients, but this has primarily been my main focus. And I said, well, let me figure out a way to pay the bills. And that's how I got some sponsors. And, big shout out to the Northwest Arkansas Council and Gary Head and the rest of the great folks, Tori Bogner and the rest of the folks at Signature Bank. Because without them, I'd have some challenges. But, I'm thankful for creating enough of a platform that people wanted to invest in it and saw the value of having something like this in the community. And that's why I'm here. We're physically at the KUAF radio station now, so which works out. But no, I mean, my advice and encouragement is to keep on going, man, because I mean, you never know where things will end up. And since James Corden has retired, that means there's going to folks are going to be missing some carpool karaoke at that level. So they may have to come on down here to Northwest Arkansas and check out my man Noah Washington and see what he's doing. So what does the future hold for you? You're about to be a rising sophomore. You've got the summer before another school year, another basketball season, another football season. A lot of good things are happening here at Northwest Arkansas. What are you excited about for this next season for you?
So I would say birthday's Friday.
Yeah, happy birthday.
Going to a NASCAR race for my first time.
That's right. You told me about that. Yeah. And you're going to actually have you're going to have a NASCAR guest on your show.
Yeah, I met him. He's local. That's the other thing, the relationships. He's going to give me a pit pass, a VIP pit pass to go hang out with the team.
That's
at the
awesome.
NASCAR race.
That's awesome. So, and that's Matt Wilson?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. Very cool. How long has he been in NASCAR?
I have not done my research yet.
That's fine. So we'll look him up and tag his Matt Wilson's team NASCAR team in the show notes so you guys can check it out for yourself. But I'm sure Noah will have plenty to report back on when he actually sits down with him, because you're actually doing that the day that we're recording this. You're actually interviewing him later today, right?
You're going to meet with him in 2 hours.
2 hours. Yeah. That's cool. Very cool. So what are you looking forward to this next year coming up?
Yeah, I'd say in the summer, kind of just doing some more self-development, filming, kind of just not have to focus on school so I can go all in on the show. If that leads me over to over to Oklahoma to film with some OKC Thunder players who used to be on the team, or my cousin is a music producer out in LA. So if that means going out and seeing if I can get in the industry a little out there, just whatever. It's just kind of development time. But then, as soon as school comes back, I'll be doing football and basketball Razorback interviews. So
that's awesome. Yeah. Now, have you had Coach Pittman in the car yet?
I have not.
You have not.
I need to get Musselman on this off season as well.
Okay. Yeah. I've been trying. I was scheduled to have Coach Musselman on the podcast, and his people called me, and unfortunately, it was when they called, I was taking my son to a soccer game up in Springfield, Missouri, and so I had to beg off, and I have not been able to get back in front of him. And the crazy thing is, he and I used to play pickup basketball together when he was an assistant coach with the Atlanta Hawks. Oh, wow. So I knew him way back when. But eventually I'll get him on. And actually, I would love to have Danielle Musselman on as well. So if you guys are listening, if you listen to the podcast, hit your boy up, because I'd love to have you on and we could talk shop. And I mean, she had an outstanding career, and now she's doing great things in the community. And that's the thing I love. I mean, you grew up here, you went to Harbor High School. I mean, what is the one thing to you that's so special about Northwest Arkansas?
How there's a little bit of everything, and people just come together and make it all work. It's cliche. Everybody who's around here says it's a melting pot, but it really is.
It is.
You got to experience it for yourself. No matter the athletes that come to town say it's nothing else is like this.
Yeah.
I mean, no matter what generation you're born in, there's something for you. I like that about it.
So did Anthony tell you what his original thoughts were? Anthony Black, when he first came here, what did he think about Fayetteville?
I think the clip I remember pulling out was that he said he likes it when there's a lot of people here. Yeah. But he doesn't like the weather.
Okay. Really? He's from Texas, though.
I know.
It's like, wow, the weather is rough in Texas, especially in the summertime.
Well, I think it's because it goes back and forth here so much.
That's true. It does probably get a little colder here than where he's from in Texas. Yeah. So, that I can understand that. So what are you excited about in terms of the future of Northwest Arkansas?
Oh, it doesn't seem like it's going to stop anytime soon. Each of those pockets of, if it's business or sports or whatever, it's all advancing. So there's more corporate companies coming here. It's expanding more. We've been in the top 20 in every team.
I know, which is exciting. And even baseball's like in the top 5 or has been. So
I'm going to start doing some baseball episodes.
That's about to say, you got to get some of these baseball players, because a lot of these guys have gone on to be, to do pretty well in the majors. So have you, who was like your biggest get that you'd love to have on the show?
Oh man, there's somebody every month. Locally or nationally?
I mean, locally. Let's just keep it locally. People that people would know around here. So mine is Nolan Richardson.
Okay.
Yeah. And Alice Walton. I would take both of those guys.
For sure, Alice Walton.
Yeah.
I met John Tyson. So I don't know if we covered this before, but my show interviews athletes, artists, and community figures.
Sure.
So it's for community figures, I would love to get a Walton, and that's the category that has the Musselmans and the Hunts in it. So I'd love to get the Tysons, the Waltons. I got the Chancellor, just some of those type of people. As athletes, I really wanted to get Nick Smith. I'll probably still get him once he's in the NBA.
Okay.
Just because I established that connection here. But that's tough. I don't know. Tip, I've learned to focus on who you can get.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. And I would imagine that once you've gotten one, that others say, hey, you should go on this guy's show. And
you jogged my brain. KJ Jefferson, John Daly Jr., and Coach Musselman. Those are all 3 people I've met before and want to actually film with.
Cool. Well, hopefully that will happen. So, and there's some really good people here. And I know that the other thing I love about Northwest Arkansas is people are always looking to help other folks out. So, I'm sure that people will see how prodigious you are at what you do with your show, the level of excellence you put into each episode, the quality of the production. I think people will see what you're all about. And so, no, I just want to applaud you, man, and say that I certainly am a big fan. And I appreciate the work that you're doing. And I also appreciate the fact that at 19, you're not letting anybody's no be a final word for you. You're like, you know what? Okay, I'll figure it out. And so I certainly am happy to see you do that. And I want to wish you nothing but continued success. And I appreciate you indulging this old man to come on the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast to tell us a little bit about you and who you are and your show. And so thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, folks, there you have it. Another episode of the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast. I hope you enjoyed Noah Washington. I really want to encourage you to check out the Ridin Around Show. It is great. If you liked Carpool Karaoke with James Corden, he's retired now. So my man Noah has taken up the bill and he's running with it. Sports, music, and cars, not necessarily in that order, but the guests that he's bringing on some amazing people. And as long as we keep bringing amazing athletes to this town, he's going to keep having a show to do. So that's awesome. But thank you again. That's another episode of the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast. To learn more about us or to read or download the show notes from today's episode, visit IamNorthwestArkansas.com. You can listen to this podcast and sign up for our free newsletter to keep up with us and all things NWA. Sign up today. You can subscribe to the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast wherever you listen to it. And please consider rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Remember, our podcast comes out every Monday, rain or shine. I'm your host, Randy Wilburn, and we'll see you back here next week for another new episode of the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast. Peace.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas. Check us out each and every week, available anywhere that great podcasts can be found. For show notes or more information on becoming a guest, visit IamNorthwestArkansas.com. We'll see you next week on I Am Northwest Arkansas.